Just right, said Burford. Latch on to some of those toothbrushes and towels and we'll spruce up a little bit. We also took hairbrushes, colognes, shaving lotions, and went laden into the bathroom. We all took baths and sang like opera stars. Burford wanted to wear the first tenor's tie, but Ed White prevailed with his casual good sense. Isn't this great? Ed White kept saying. Using the opera star's bathroom and towels and shaving lotion and razors. It was a wonderful night. Central City is 2 miles high. At first, you get drunk on the altitude, and then you get tired, and then there's a fever in your soul. We approached the lights around the Opera House down the narrow, dark street. Then we took a sharp right and hit some old saloons with swinging doors. Most of the tourists were in the opera. We started off with a few extra-sized jumbo beers. There was a player piano. Beyond the back door was a view of the mountainsides in the moonlight. I let out a yahoo. The night was on. We rushed back to our miner's shack. Everything was in preparation for the big party. The girls, Bev and Jean, cooked up a snack of beans and franks, and then we danced on to our music and started on the beer for fare. The opera over, great crowds of young girls came piling into our place. Burford and Ed and I licked our lips. We grabbed them and danced. There was no music, just dancing. The place filled up. People began to bring bottles. We rushed out to hit bars and rushed back. The night was getting more and more frantic. I wished Neil and Alan were there. Then I realized they'd be out of place and unhappy. They were like the man with the dungeon stone and the gloom rising from the underground, the sordid hipsters of America, a new beat generation that I was slowly joining. The boys from the chorus showed up. They began singing Sweet Adeline. They also sang such phrases as pass me the beer and what are you doing with your face hanging out, and great long baritone howls of Fi de Leo. Ah me, what gloom, I sang. The girls were terrific. They went out in the backyard and napped. There were beds in the other rooms, the unclean, dusty ones, and I had a girl sitting on it and was talking with her when suddenly there was a great inrush of young ushers from the opera, half of them hired by Brierly, who just grabbed girls and kissed them without proper come-ons. Teenagers, drunk, disheveled, excited. They ruined our party. Inside of 5 minutes, every single girl was gone, and a great big fraternity-type party got underway with banging of beer bottles and roars. Bob and Ed and I decided to go hit the bars. Temco was gone. Bev and Jean were gone. We tottered into the night. The opera crowd was out, jamming from the bars, from bar to wall. Temco was shouting above heads. Justin W. Brierly was shaking hands with everybody and saying, "Good afternoon, how are you?" And when midnight came, he was saying, "Good afternoon, how are you?" At one point, I saw him rushing the mayor of Denver off somewhere. Then he came back with a middle-aged woman. Next minute, he was talking to a couple of young ushers in the street. The next minute, he was shaking my hand without recognizing me and saying, "Happy New Year, boy." He wasn't drunk on liquor, just drunk on what he liked. Thousands of people milling, and he, the director of it. Dancing master death, indeed. But I liked him. I always liked J.W. Brierly. He was sad. I saw him threading through the crowd in loneliness. Everybody knew him. "Happy New Year," he called, and sometimes "Merry Christmas," he said all the time. At Christmas, he said Happy Halloween. There was an artist in the bar who was highly respected by everyone. Justin had insisted that I meet him, and I was trying to avoid it. His name was Bellaconda or some such thing. His wife was with him. They sat sourly at the table. There was also some kind of Argentinian tourist at the bar. Burford gave him a shove to make room. He turned and snarled. Burford handed me his glass and knocked him down on the brass rail with one punch. The man was momentarily out. There were screams. Ed and I scooted Burford out. There was so much confusion, the sheriff couldn't even thread his way through the crowd to find the victim. Nobody could identify Burford. We went out to the other bars. Temco staggered up the street. "What the hell's the matter? Any fights? Just call on me." Great laughter rang from all sides. I wondered what the spirit of the mountain was thinking, and looked up, saw jack pines and the moon, and saw ghosts of old miners, and wondered about it. In the whole eastern dark wall of the divide this night, there was silence and the whisper of the wind, except in the ravine where we roared. And on the other side of the divide was the great western slope and the big plateau that went to Steamboat Springs and dropped and led you to the eastern Colorado desert and the Utah desert, all in darkness, now as we fumed and screamed in our mountain nook, mad, drunken Americans in the mighty land, and beyond, beyond, over the Sierras, the other side of Carson Sink was bejeweled, bay encircled, night-like, old Frisco of my dreams. We were situated on the roof of America, and all we could do was yell, I guess, across the night, eastward over the plains, where somewhere an old man with his white hair was probably walking towards us with the word, and would arrive any minute and make us silent. Burford exceeded all bounds. He insisted on going back to the bar where he'd fought. Ed and I didn't like what he did, but stuck to him. He went up to Bellaconda, the artist, and threw a highball in his face. His sister, Bev, screamed, "No, Bob, not that!" We dragged him out. He was beyond himself. A baritone singer from the chorus joined us, and we went up to a regular Central City bar. Here he called the waitress a whore. A group of sullen men were ranged along the bar. They hated tourists, and one of them said, "You boys better be out of here by the count of 10. And we staggered back to the shack and went off to sleep. In the morning, I woke up and turned over. A big cloud of dust rose from the mattress. I yanked at the window. It was nailed. Ed was in the bed too. We coughed and sneezed. Our breakfast consisted of stale beer. Beverly came back from her hotel and we got our things together to leave, but we had to go and watch Bellaconda, the artist, at Brierly's orders, mixing things in his kiln. It would constitute Burford's apology. We all stood around the kiln as the artist lectured. Burford smiled and nodded and tried to look interested and looked sheepish as hell. Brierly stood by proudly. Beverly leaned on me wearily. I cut out, went to the ushers' dormitories and found a toilet, and as I sat there, I saw an eye in the keyhole. "Who's that in there?" said the voice. "Jack," I said. It was Brierly. He was wandering around and had got bored in the kiln. Everything seemed to be collapsing. As we were going down the steps of the miner's house, Beverly slipped and fell flat on her face. Poor girl was overwrought. Her brother and Ed and I helped her up. We got back in the car. Temko and Jean joined us. The sad ride back to Denver began. Suddenly, we came down from the mountain and overlooked the great seaplain of Denver. Heat rose as from an oven. We began to sing songs. I was itching to get on to San Francisco. That night, I found Alan, and to my amazement, he told me he'd been in Central City with Neil. "What'd you do?" "Oh, we ran around the bars, and then Neil stole a car, and we drove back down the mountain curves 90 miles an hour. I didn't see you. We didn't know you were there." "Well, man, I'm going to San Francisco. Neil has Ruth lined up for you tonight." "Well, then I'll put it off." I had no money. I sent my mother an airmail letter asking her for $50 and said it would be the last money I'd ask. After that, she'd be getting money back from me as soon as I got off that ship. Then I went to go meet Ruth Goulion. Took her back to the apartment. I got her in my bedroom after a long talk in the dark of the front room. She was a nice girl, simple and true, tremendously frightened of sex. She said it was because she saw such awful things in the hospital. I told her it was beautiful. I wanted to prove this to her. She let me prove it. But I was too impatient and proved nothing. She sighed in the dark. "What do you want out of life?" I asked, and I used to ask that all the time out of the girls. "I don't know," she said. "Just work and try and get along." She yawned. I put my hand over her mouth and told her not to yawn. I tried to tell her how excited I was about life and the things that we could do together, saying that and planning to leave Denver in 2 days. She turned away wearily. We lay on our backs looking at the ceiling and wondering what God had wrought when he made life so sad and disinclined. We made vague plans to meet in Frisco. My moments in Denver were coming to an end. I could feel it when I walked her home in the holy Denver night, and on the way back stretched out on the grass of an old church with a bunch of hobos, and their talk made me want to get back on that road. Every now and then one would get up and hit a passerby for a dime. They talked of harvests moving north. It was warm and soft. I wanted to go and get Ruth again and tell her a lot more things and really make love to her this time. Calmer fears about men. Boys and girls in America have such a sad time together. Sophistication demands that they submit to sex immediately without proper preliminary talk, not courting talk. Real, straight talk about souls. For life is holy, and every moment precious. I heard the Denver and Rio Grande locomotive howling off to the mountains, and I wanted to pursue my star further. Temco and I sat sadly talking in the midnight hours. Have you ever read The Green Hills of Africa? It's Hemingway's best. We wished each other luck. We would meet in Frisco. I saw Burford under a dark tree in the street. Goodbye, Bob. When do we meet again? I went to look for Alan and Neil. Nowhere to be found. Ed White shot his hand up in the air and said, "Sorry you're leaving, yo." We called each other yo. Yep, I said, and I wandered around Denver. It seemed to me every bum on Larimer Street maybe was Neil Cassidy's father, old Neil Cassidy, they called him, the barber. I went in the Windsor Hotel where father and son had lived, and where one night Neil was frightfully waked up by the legless man on the rollerboard who shared the room with them, who came thundering across the floor on his terrible wheels to touch the boy. I saw the little midget newspaper selling woman with the short legs on the corner of Curtis and 15th. "Man," Neil told me, "think of lifting her in the air and fucking her." I walked around the sad honky-tonks of Curtis Street. Young kids in jeans and red shirts, peanut shells, movie marquees, shooting parlors. Beyond the glittering street was darkness, and beyond the darkness, the west. I had to go. At dawn, I found Alan. I read some of his enormous journal, slept there, and in the morning, drizzly and gray, tall 6-foot Al Hinkle came in with Bill Thompson, a handsome kid, Jim Holmes, the hunchback pool shark. Jim Holmes had saintly big blue eyes, but he was a mumbling bore. He wore a beard. He lived with his grandmother. Big Al was the son and brother of a cop family. Bill Thompson claimed he could run faster than Neil. They sat around and listened with abashed smiles as Allen Ginsberg read them his apocalyptic, mad poetry. I slumped in my chair. Finished. "Oh, you Denver birds," cried Allen. We all filed out and went up a typical cobbled Denver alley between incinerators, smoking slowly. "I used to roll my hoop up this alley," Hal Chase had told me. I wanted to see him do it. I wanted to see Denver 10 years ago, when they were all children, and in the sunny cherry blossom morning of springtime in the Rockies, they rolled their hoops up the joyous alleys full of promise, the whole gang, and Neil, ragged and dirty, prowling by himself with a preoccupied frenzy. Bill Thompson and I walked in the drizzle. I went to Eddie's girl's house, got my wool-plaid shirt back, the shirt of Preston, Nebraska. It was all there, all tied up, the whole enormous sadness of the shirt. Bill Thompson said he'd meet me in Frisco. Everybody was going to Frisco.